Welcome to the CAD Builder video tutorial series. In this video, we will take a look at how to create a dowel joint connection. We will review the different settings available for this type of joint and how to apply it to your cabinet construction. Let's open a new drawing and select the construction module from the main menu, and then select the last section titled Construction Connection. We will first create a new connection construction for our dowel joint by selecting the dowel joint template and hit the Create icon located at the bottom of the list. In the window, select the bottom drop-down menu and select Dowel Joint Template. Then, in the top text field, we will type My Dowel Joint and then hit Create in order to create our own connection. At the bottom of the list, go ahead and open My Dowel Joint and we will take a look at the construction options list so that we can set up the parameters to our preference. First one is to select the connector you would like to use. Over on the right, select the three dots to open up the connector selector to see the dowel pin sizes available. This list comes from the materials section showing some pre-built dowel sizes. However, if you do need one that is not listed here, you can create a new one in the materials section in the connectors group simply by selecting Create at the top to add a new one and set it to the size that you need. For this example, I'll select the 1/4 inch option, hit OK, and then select the option on the right to update it. Next is for the dowel diameter. Now we did just set the dowel size, but this will officially set the diameter of the hole that will be placed into the other part that will accept the dowel. So since I have set a 1/4 inch for my dowel, then this should be also set to 1/4 inch. The dowel hole diameter gap would then further increase the diameter of that hole by some additional adjustment. For example, if you wanted it to be a little wider to be routed by another bit, you could assign that dimension here. Side hole depth is the depth of the hole in the part that accepts the dowel. Edge hole depth refers to the hole on the other part that gets the initial dowel insertion. So in this case, the green part would get the dowel. The hole is made into the yellow part, which accepts the dowel. Edge hole position is where the dowel is placed relative to the green part. With many shops, it is difficult to side drill into a part, which would be the green part in this example. So you would create the hole into the yellow part by either performing that manually or by using a dowel insertion machine, which would require a set distance to create that hole. Here is where you can set the distance from the bottom edge of the part to the center of these holes. If you are using a machine, then you can set a fixed distance from the finished side to the center of the hole, or from the unfinished side to the center of the hole. I will set this to 9 millimeters for this example today. It is best to set this measurement to millimeters in order for this value to be exact if you are using a dowel insertion machine, and if you are sending this to a CNC. The holes arrangement setting allows you to set the quantity of holes and the spacing between the holes to your specifications for this joint. Here we have 4 different arrangements: front to rear, rear to front, front and rear, and centered. Let's start with the centered option. Once selected, you will need to set the end hole positions as you see in this image here. You can either set the exact distance from the holes to the material edges, or you can set them to a minimum distance. Then the holes quantity allows you to decide on how many holes are created. Now if you select quantity, this gives you the option to set it to just one hole down the middle, if that's your preference, or a certain number of holes. If I set it to 4 and take a look at the wireframe editor for a wall cabinet, you will see that it has added 4 holes for this connection. If you select spacing, this will guarantee at least 2 holes. The distance you set here indicates the maximum spacing allowed between 2 holes, measuring from the centers of each hole. If that measurement exceeds this dimension value, then a 3rd hole will be added in the middle. So if your part measures 10 inches from the center of the front hole and a rear hole and you have the maximum spacing set to 3 inches, it will place 2 additional holes in order to satisfy that requirement. As an example, I will set the maximum spacing to 6 inches and take a look at a wall cabinet in our wireframe editor. Here is a standard wall cabinet that's currently 12 inches deep. Now you can see these joints, and since we are at 12 inches deep right now, we have a quantity of 3. If we follow the math, we have 1 inch on either hole at the end, then 10 inches left between the holes. CAB Builder will say, okay, 10 is greater than the 6 inches that we had set for the maximum, therefore it will add an additional hole to fulfill that requirement. Then, if I change the depth to 24 inches, for instance, it will add an additional 2 holes in order to keep each distance less than 6 inches. Then the third option is for 32 millimeter spacing, which will add a hole every 32 millimeters or below. Now if we set the holes arrangement at front to rear, we will specify the position of the first hole, and then CAB Builder will place a hole in a set interval until it reaches a minimum distance from the back edge. For an example, I'll set the first hole position to 1.5 inches, the spacing to 3 inches, and the last hole to 1.5 inches. Here you can see what that image would look like in the wireframe editor. Next option is rear to front, similar to the front to rear, just the opposite orientation. So again, you would set the first hole position, but this time it's in relation to the rear edge of the part. Then set the hole spacing. It will then add 1 each per the spacing you set until it reaches the front minimum distance. Finally, we have front and rear. In this case, you will be setting the holes for 3 groups: the front, the rear, and then possible middle holes. For the front hole position, you will indicate the first hole position from the front edge and how many there should be, and then the spacing between the holes. For today, I'll keep this at 1 inch from the front, and then the quantity I'll set to 2, and spacing will be set to 2 inches between them. Then the same options for the rear position, quantity, and spacing. Once again, I will set these to 1 inch from the rear, quantity of 2, and 2 inches between them. Then you have the middle holes, where you can set the static quantity of holes, or you can tell it to add as many holes such that it won't exceed this maximum spacing between the rearmost front hole and the frontmost rear hole. Since the more dowels added, the more strength for that joint, typically when the joint is longer, this will give you the opportunity to add more dowels per your size requirements. So I will set this to a maximum spacing of 4 inches, and then we'll take a look at an example in the wireframe editor here. So for a 12-inch deep wall cabinet, we have 1 inch from the front to the first hole, then 2 inches to the next one, and the same on the other side, which equals 6 inches. For the middle hole, my maximum was 4-inch spacing, so it put 1 middle hole in here, and that way it's a total of 6 inches left, giving this 3 inches on either side of the middle hole. Now if I change the depth to 16 inches, you can see it has added an additional hole in the middle so that it doesn't exceed my maximum distance of 4 inches between holes. Back to our dowel joint, we see there are 2 more parameters here to set. First is the parts gap, which is present in every joint in case a gap is needed. But typically, the distance between the 2 parts is set to 0, since most of the time we want the parts to be flush. Lastly, we will need to set the joint to whether we will be using a CNC machine or cutting these out manually. Now this joint is all set to use in your cabinet construction. If these do not fully describe your doweling pattern, then you can make multiple dowel joints and stack them on the same composite joint. We will cover how to create composite joints in the next video. Thank you for watching, and we will see you then. To view additional video tutorials, please visit www.cabbuildersoftware.com/training.